Previously, we had Laban talking to Jacob, who was there, and said, look, you're like my brother. You're related to me. It's not fair that you work for me for nothing. So, name your wage, and I'll pay it. Or, I'm paraphrasing, that's what he meant. Now he was waiting for Jacob to answer. And we will talk about it right now. Laban had two daughters. Genesis 29:16-22. The name of the elder was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. Leah was tender-eyed, but Rachel was beautiful and well-favored. And Jacob loved Rachel and said, I will serve you 7 years for Rachel, your younger daughter. And Laban said, it is better that I give her to you than that I should give her to another man. Live with me. And Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed unto him but a few days, for the love he had to her. And Jacob said unto Laban, give me my wife, for my days are fulfilled, that I may go in unto her. And Laban gathered together all the men of the place and made a great feast. Let's unpack this so that we can understand better. I mean, it's already clearly laid out. But did you realize the name Leah meant weary or tired? And the name Rachel meant sheep or female sheep, more commonly known as an ewe. It was already suggested how Rachel got her name. She was a shepherdess, right? But what about Leah? She was described as tender-eyed, contrasted with Rachel as beautiful and well-favored. The expression tender-eyed in ancient Hebrew implied soft, blue eyes. It was thought of as a blemish or weakness. Man, how different that is today, isn't it? Or looking tired. That's probably how she got her name. She always looked tired. Rachel, on the other hand, had strong and expressive, sparkling brown eyes, and it was considered a sign of strength. You know, some of those beautiful Mideastern women you've seen in action, and whoa, that was like Rachel. So, the kind of discrimination is still done in the 21st century, isn't it? Something is considered a weakness and something is considered a strength, when sometimes we're completely wrong because we judged by appearances. Isn't that right? But we have something else. Jacob lived with him for a month. So, Jacob must have come to know them all, or know both of those women during the month he lived among them. But he fell in love with Rachel. What would you consider a fair wage was asked by Laban in verse 15. Jacob's answer was almost immediate. I will serve you 7 years for Rachel, your younger daughter. Daughters in those countries, do you realize? Daughters in those countries and times, ancient Middle East, were also objects of value, valuable. You see, they worked for free. Their parents expected to receive considerable presents to compensate for the loss of their free labor. Do you realize? And that's called a dowry. Jacob hoped that his 7 years' hard labor would more than compensate for a dowry to pay for Rachel. Well, Laban answered him. In answer, Laban said, well, it is definitely better that I give her to you than that I should give her to another man. Live with me. In other words, Laban appeared to accept the deal that was made, and he invited Jacob to live with him. Now, verse 20 is so simple. We read that. In its beauty and simplicity, it depicts a man totally head over heels in love. And Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed to him but a few days for the love he had for her. May I remind you that these 7 years were from the 78th year, he was mid-70s, 77, to the 85th year of Jacob's age. Man, he was an old man, and yet he was willing to marry Rachel and then Leah. No other feeling of the human heart could have shortened and sweetened the term of that lengthened bondage of 7 years' hard labor. Nothing except for love and the grace of God could enable its possessor to render a willing, happy, and joyful obedience. Wow. At the end of the term of service, we read in verse 21. And Jacob said to Laban, give me my wife, for my days are fulfilled, that I may go in unto her. To our 21st century mind, that may sound cruel. Give me my wife, that I may go in unto her. Huh. But up to 2,000 years ago, marriage arrangements were made by engagement practices called a betrothal. Nothing was done. They kept each other pure for each other during that time. What Jacob did was enter into a betrothal period, and now it was time to close the deal, to consummate his betrothal into a marriage on the wedding bed. Remember, when they had these intimate relations, it was called wifing. Do you realize that? And she would then be his wife. Oh, Jacob could hardly wait. But first, party! And Laban gathered together all the men of the palace and made a feast. And after the banquet, the groom would go to the bridal chamber to join his beloved bride-to-be, who would be waiting patiently for the groom to both come into her and remove the veil she was wearing. This would be considered the marriage ceremony. This would seal the deal, as he now belonged to his bride, and the bride now belonged to him. You know, I was just thinking, the bride would wait for the groom. You know, this picture just entered my mind. You realize one day Jesus will come as the bridegroom to his church to claim his bride, the church. My question to you right now is, if you are part of the church, are you ready for him to come?